Hello, everyone. The year of 2019 is coming to a close, and it's the end of a decade. But it's also 20 years since the end of the millennium with 1999. Today, from a 90s kid to other 90s kids out there, I'm going to bring you my recollection and retrospective of the year 1999. So, 1999 was a pretty major year, and I want to just reflect upon it because there's a lot of people who are like already much older in 1999 reflecting. There's other people who are like, I'm a 90s kid, even though I was born like in the middle of 95 and then post. There's some people who are born in 1999 that are reminiscing about how it's like to be a 90s kid, and I want to bring you something for myself to you out there of my recollection of 99 from an actual 90s kid. As long as you're born in the mid 80s to early 90s, you know what the 90s was like, and it was a wonderful, wonderful time. The 90s was an age of Space Jam, Gigapets, Furbies, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Toonami, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Saturday morning cartoons, Kids WB, Fox Kids, Batman the Animated Series, Goosebumps, the show, and the books. Man, it was quite something. And 1999 had so much stuff with music, television, films. I mean, here are VHSs. You had The Sixth Sense, Phantom Menace, The Resurgence of Star Wars, underrated classic Mystery Men, which brought us the song All Star by Smash Mouth, Kevin Smith's film Dogma, The Matrix. Man, it was amazing seeing that dodge the bullet sequence for the first time ever. Brendan Fraser's The Mummy. We also had films like Fight Club, Blair Witch Project, which I could have sworn was real. My brother actually saw the Blair Witch Project at an independent film theater, and when that film was coming out, people did not know it was fiction. They thought it was like a legit documentary found from these students who were killed by this Blair Witch in the woods. Like, it was scary. It was something that changed the genre that wouldn't be replicated till years later with Paranormal Activity. But you also had Being John Malkovich, interesting low-budget film with John Malkovich, also stars John Cusack and Cameron Diaz. Pokemon, the first movie, you had the Ancient Mew card, but 1999 was a special year. I was in the third grade, and it was one of those years where I was totally looking forward to Phantom Menace. I remember seeing the trailer on Rugrats, the movie. Yeah. And that teaser was very interesting. I thought it was actually going to be a sequel. I didn't know it was a prequel. That was like something new back then of like, what's a prequel? Who could forget Cartoon Network? You had shows like Ed, Edd and Eddy and Courage the Cowardly Dog premiere that year. And speaking of Wild Wild West, you had the song Wild Wild West, Baila Mos by Enrique Iglesias, and there is a certain kind of Latin wave with that. Livin' La Vida Loca with Ricky Martin, Genie in a Bottle by Christina Aguilera, Santana's reemergence with Rob Thomas's Smooth. You have Mark Anthony, who could forget Mambo Number 5, Britney Spears with You Drive Me Crazy and Hit Me Baby One More Time. Yeah, and then Backstreet Boys, I Want It That Way, Larger Than Life. Oh my god. Dude, the music was just so iconic for that era. Still My Sunshine by Lynn. Oh man, and who could forget Say My Name by Destiny's Child? That was such a groundbreaking song when first hearing that introduction of Beyonce. Then there's also the film Galaxy Quest. I love that film. My brother and I thought that was going to be like a serious sci-fi film like Star Trek, and it was a brilliant parody slash satire. I discovered older films like Saturday Night Fever. Yeah, I know, way old for my age. Way, way old. But it was a year between that, discovering the Mad Max trilogy on VHS, and these films behind me that really made me want to become a storyteller. And it's strange because I remember as a year I discovered what a record was. Now that vinyl is kind of making a reemergence, my sister's like, I have the record for Saturday Night Fever. I'm like, what's a record? Yes, I did say that, but I had CD players and stuff. Had this inflatable Darth Maul chair that year. I love the year of 1999. It was a major deal because it was the end of a millennium. I remember it being 2000. That was a big deal. I wasn't really quite aware of the Y2K mess when I was a kid till years later, but 1999 was a very special year. Anybody who grew up in the 90s, you know what it was like. If you're in America, like the economy, but also like there's a certain layer of innocence. I don't know if it's just childhood. Everybody thinks their childhood was the best time, the most innocent. But there's definitely something about our world during that time and growing up as a 90s kid that was quite different than what was to come in the years ahead. And I just want to reflect upon that 20 years later. I just can't believe it's been 20 years. But you know what? Unlike 2009 and 2019, it doesn't feel that fast, you know, it feels a lot longer. Like, I really do feel like it's been 20 years, and that's because I was like a kid in 1999. It's a long time, and I love it. The Mummy here, my mom got it for me on October on Halloween. The Matrix, my brother showed me that. I saw it on VHS, and I fell in love with that. Mystery Men, my mom and I saw in theaters. The Sixth Sense was one film where I did not know the twist. I was like, oh my god, Bruce Willis was a dead guy the whole movie? It was crazy, man. I enjoy seeing Phantom Menace in theaters. I know that film gets really, really heavily criticized, but that was the first Star Wars I saw in theaters. And it wasn't like the days of Fandango and online ticket sales and like IMAX and 3D. No. Very limited amount of theater rooms. And also, people had to camp out early to see that movie. And I saw it like on the fourth day. People were having lightsaber fights in front. It was crazy, the theater culture back then and what people had to do to camp out to see a movie on opening weekend, especially one as big as Star Wars, you know. It's a time that remains in the past. Stuff is dated that should still remain dated, that shouldn't be brought back. But there's just like lightning in a bottle for 1999. And there is such an anticipation for what was to come in the next millennium and the next decade. That sort of carried over until the early 2000s, but our innocence was kind of lost in the years to come. And I felt like the spirit of the 90s kind of dissipated in the mid-2000s, and definitely by the time 2009 and them came along. But the same could be said with the 80s going to the 90s. You know, you have similar music trends, similar fashion, going to grunge, and then more towards that pop. I also have fond memories of the Disney Channel with the movie Surfers. I love that. Yeah, that's where I saw the Backstreet Boys music video for Larger Than Life, and that was one song that actually, I had an idea to use it on a Ghost Rider film. I was reading Ghost Rider comics with my brothers, and yeah, that's weird. Yeah, that was nice. And then going back to Wild Wild West, it was an introduction of the Burger King Big Kids Meal. The first time you went from a Happy Meal, and instead of going to adult, no, you're a big kid now. So they had that with like some sunglasses from Artemis Gordon and Jim West. Still have that stuff today, man. I love it. First time they introduced the Burger King Big Kids Meal. And then on Kids WB, we got the introduction of Batman Beyond. And I was really hating that show when it first came on. I'm like, I don't want to watch this kid Batman. I want to watch Bruce Wayne. But you know what? That show was ahead of its time. And it's aged like a fine wine. I really appreciate that show now. Video games. We had Crash Team Racing. Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage. That was such an awesome game from Spyro the Dragon. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I love the first 2 or 3 games in Underground, man, but that first Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was just amazing. There was nothing like it. There still hasn't really been anything quite like it, and I really wish they did more with that franchise now, but that was something groundbreaking when it first came out, you know? Those are just my brief memories of 1999. Feel free to share your personal memories. What do you remember the most from the year 1999? And what is it like being a 90s kid? Feel free to tell everybody else reading how great it was to be a 90s kid.